I would love to have everyone on our panel take a moment to introduce themselves and talk about what Patreon has done for them and what it has meant to them. So I'll start. My name is Soraya Een Hajji. I am the media director for Extra Credits, which is a YouTube channel about video games and now history. The history section was enabled by Patreon. We are huge geeks about pretty much everything geeky, and we wanted to create a show about history, but we didn't have the money to fund it. So we turned to our audience and said, if you would be interested in watching us create these videos about history, then please consider donating to our Patreon. And now Extra History is a weekly animated show that we do thanks to Patreon's help.
I'm Zach Weinersmith. I draw a comic called Saturday Morning Breakfast Cereal, and I write some books and such. The big thing for Patreon, or for me for Patreon, has been it allowed me to hire a full-time employee for the first time. And because the company had previously made enough money in aggregate to do that, but it was unpredictable due to the just cyclical quality of merchandise and ad revenue, whereas Patreon is extraordinarily stable revenue. And so that meant I could be certain I could hire this person and still be able to pay them far into the future, which has made a huge difference for the company.
I'm Alex Woolfson, and basically my goal is to kind of create slick genre stories, sci-fi stories, superhero stories that have heroes who just happen to like other guys. And so, I've done 2 books. I've done Artifice and The Young Protectors, but basically I started them all as webcomics, and I still release webcomics twice a week. And it got to December of last year, and I was putting so much time into my webcomic work, I did not have time to do my day job. And so it was, as it approached the end of last year, I was going to have to make a decision whether I was going to be able to continue making comics. And I'd had some successful Kickstarters, and I'd heard about Patreon, but I was not, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to sustain that and make that happen, but I took a risk. I launched my Patreon in January, and I was able to quit my day job this summer, and this is now how I make my living, thanks to Patreon.
Yeah! Woo!
My name is Tanya DePass. I started the I Need Diverse Games hashtag, and I actually have 2 Patreons. One is for the work of I Need Diverse Games that goes back out to the community, so people need assistance with conventions, things like that. It goes back out. The only time I've ever used it for myself is actually paying for part of the costs here. But I've also started a personal Patreon because I would like to get on Alex's level and quit my day job, mostly because I kind of hate my day job, and I know it's being recorded. I don't care. So basically, because I want to keep kind of a separation of, by contributing to my personal Patreon, you're helping me do this work full time because I don't want the quality of things I'm doing for I Need Diverse Games to slip, but I also need insurance and a roof over my head. So that's where I'm actually managing 2 and not quite making ends meet with either one.
Cool. Hey, what's up? My name is Brianna Wu. I think my Patreon use case is a little bit different than everyone else's here. So I don't know if anyone here has heard of Gamergate, but I get targeted with a ridiculous amount of harassment. I get doxxed on a nearly daily basis. In fact, I have reported 3 doxes since last night. So my Patreon it's a very interesting kind of mix that a lot of the work I do for women in tech, it all happens in back channel. Like, I'll give you an example. This week, we are working with a major tech company that I can't give you the name of it to work on their policies towards LGBT people behind the scenes, talking about the way doxing can specifically hurt us by outing us. So what this does is it kind of goes behind the scenes, and we have people at my company that help make that possible. So it's everything from cleaning up my Twitter, because the mental damage of constantly reading the most horrible, abusive doxes about me, it takes a real toll. But my Patreon also funds some of that behind the scenes work. It's a very hard thing to quantify. Like, how do you tell the people supporting your Patreon, hey, we had meetings all week with this company, but I can't tell you about it, right? But it's been fantastic, and it's not an exaggeration to say that we would not have a lot of the behind-the-scenes changes that we've had this year at major social media and tech companies without my Patreon. So I am very thankful for the people that have helped me.
Fantastic. So I think that I love this set of panelists that we were able to get for this because we all have such a great range of what Patreon does for us, right? And that goes to illustrating a point about Patreon is a very flexible system, and what it can do for you depends a lot on what you need. And so that's why from this point forward, I would like to turn it over to you folks who have come here to ask your questions, and we will do our best to answer them from our experience. How can you run a successful Patreon? And as you're asking them, bear in mind that there is no type of project that's like, I don't think this is the sort of thing. If you have a project that you think you can fund through Patreon, we would love to talk to you about how to make that effective. And there's a wide range of things that you can do. If you can find a community, if you can communicate what you're trying to do, there's a wide range of things that you can do with this resource. So anyone have any questions to start us off? Yes?
Yeah, I was kind of curious. I know on Kickstarter and also on Patreon, depending on, there are different levels according to being able to hit certain goals. How do you determine what are certain rewards according to what goals you get hit for each month?
Okay, so the question was, how do you determine what goals you should, are you talking about milestone monthly goals?
Milestones, monthly,
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
just goals in general, I know they end up
They do overlap a little bit. Well, we'll start with milestones, though. So in Patreon, there's a difference between you can have an individual makes a monthly donation, say $5 a month. Collectively, everyone contributes to try and hit a milestone of, let's say, when this Patreon hits $3,000 a month, I will quit my day job, maybe. And so that's what a milestone is on Patreon. And the question was, how do you determine what your milestones should be? So has anyone here used milestones? Sure, can you talk about them?
Sure. Do you mind if I attach this back up here? Or just I can swing it back and forth. Yeah, so I actually, I use milestones. They're a huge part of my campaign, actually, the milestone goals. And I actually use them differently than how Patreon kind of advertises them on the tin. Mm-hmm. So, as you said, a milestone is like when you hit $3,000, for example, you say something's going to happen. The way Patreon kind of describes that is, they'll often say, oh, when I hit $500, I'm able to buy my computer. Or when I hit $1,000, I'm able to make rent. And it's all sort of, from my point of view, that's one way to do it, but that's sort of very me kind of focused. And one of the things that I learned from Kickstarter is to really be focused on how to provide value to the people who are supporting you. And so the way that I think of Kickstarter, I think of the milestone goals in particular, is okay, when we hit $2,000, I'll be able to afford to commission this artist to create this sexy image that would never happen in my actual comic, and you get to vote on who's in it. Mm-hmm. And I found with that actually in my own experience, even though my audience is not as large as some other webcomic creators, that the actual amount of money that I've been able to kind of earn through Patreon has been comparable to people who have maybe 20 or 30 times my audience. Just in sort of smart kind of ways of thinking with milestone goals, how can I make it better for everyone who's part of my Patreon? Yeah. And that's very much sort of the things I learned from Kickstarter in terms of stretch goals. So that's my thought.
Can I add a little bit on top of that? I think sometimes there's, I think we're so inculcated into the spend money, get something thing, that I think sometimes when I talk to people about Patreon, there's a tendency to focus on that. What are they getting? I can say for me, because it's very different. You create a comic, it gets out there. For me, it's much more amorphous. And what I find is, you're dealing with people that emotionally care about the issue. Everyone, if you're here today, raise your hand if you're not very frustrated with the way LGBT people are created, or the diversity problem. We're all frustrated about that, right? So I think it's more useful to think about it in emotional terms rather than transactional terms. So if you can give updates, if you can tell the people you are achieving A, B, and C, if you can engage them emotionally, I think that is a more helpful paradigm than this kind of transactional, give me A, get B back. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, we also, go ahead.
For me, and let me know if you can't hear me because I have to lean over the table. For me, I actually just shifted the milestones on the I Need Diverse Games Patreon because what we decided was to have more information that's out there, so I at least feel like you're getting something for your money. Because like Brianna, it's a very intangible thing where it's you're sending me this money, I'm doing good things with it, but there's not a physical thing you're getting, except at a certain level, and I send you a T-shirt once. But other than that, what are you actually getting for us? We want to be able to pay someone to manage content, to do things, because again, I still have a full-time job. So I want to be able to give something back to the people who are supporting this work, because it's hard work, and I think that's something that hopefully we get to touch on, that you're still doing the work, and I think monetary value for the work you're doing, whether or not you get a physical thing, is important to recognize.
Yeah. What I've found is there's definitely an emotional connection that you have with your patrons on Patreon. For us, it is another community, right? We have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have YouTube in our case. Patreon is its own separate community, but it's a very different one because Patreon is a self-selecting community of people who are already into your work. And for them, there's a lot of emotional investment in hearing that the creator that they're supporting is doing well, which is why something like I'm going to quit my day job can be really like aspirational for them too, because they're like, I have helped someone that I really like do something that makes them really happy. And it's also, and that's sort of the driving focus behind rewards as well, that are like, we'll be able to create a different kind of art that we weren't able to create before, because for them that's like, I have enabled this creator that I care about so much to create more of the stuff that they enjoy, more of the stuff that I enjoy, and they feel a part of that process. As far as the nitty-gritty, if you're interested in hearing about like how financially to calculate it, I would look at creating some good gaps, and it depends. You have to be realistic. Look at some other Patreons that are similar to yours. There's a lot of them out there, but find some that are in the sort of venue that you want to create yours in. See how much they're making, and then figure, okay, maybe if the top person who does the same sort of thing that you do is making about $2,000 a month, then you probably want goals that'll, like 2 to 3 goals that'll help you get to that point. So like a $5,000 goal, or sorry, a $500 goal. let's keep it, modest here, people. 500, 1,000, 2,000, right? Just something to help you on your way. And whatever you're setting for those goals, think about how much you think it'll cost you, and then add 20% just to be sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I have a quick question, because the word Patreon, I think, brings up that question about transactional versus sort of emotional. I imagine that some folks who are giving money on Patreon are viewing as, I want to support this work to keep going, I'm not expecting something back. But I imagine some people are like, I'm supporting this person owes me something. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that ownership can be, I want an object. But sometimes I'd imagine, and I'm asking how you guys cope if some people say, I'm giving you money, so you owe me a part of you.
Yeah.
You owe me something. Do what I want you to do.
Sure.
Make the art that I want to see.
Yeah.
Because I'm supporting you.
Right.
I can honestly say I've never had anything close to that. And, but maybe it's the different nature of my work, because again, I'm not creating anything specific.
I want to quickly restate the question. Says
sure.
The recording for our people who are watching this later. The question was, with Patreon, do you find that people who are paying in money with this idea of patronage, do they come back to you and say, I'm not just emotionally supporting you, I expect something and I demand something, and if you don't deliver on that something, I'm going to be mad.
Yeah.
All right. So
if I can, this is a bigger thing, and this applies to all kinds of business ventures that you can go into. What I find the difference is between, say, all of us here who are kind of more diversity focused and like kind of more of the soulless business types that I often hit in the game industry. I think sometimes we let fears and worries hold us back, and I think that's not a super helpful paradigm, right? Like if that did happen to me, I would call that person up, I would talk to them directly, if they needed to go somewhere else, I would be like, that's cool, I respect that. But don't let that hold you back. Like if you're gonna step up, do the work, just assume that you're gonna be able to provide what they're looking for.
Mm-hmm. I would also say that on our Patreon, we mostly have people who are like, I've had people straight up say, I don't even care what you spend this money on, I just like what you do and I want to help you out. But we have had people like, hey, where's this monthly reward, where's this monthly reward? And what we try to do is just like, we try to, first of all, anticipate, right? Like if something is going to be late, like we can't do a Q&A the month we said we were going to do, we have to do it the week after the month ends. We'll put something out early and be like, oh, we're going to have to delay for this reason. Basically, we want to communicate to them and show we are thinking about you, right? We have not forgotten about this obligation that we have to you, and we take it very seriously. We're going to make it up to you at some point. And I have found that diffuses all the situations where somebody is like, well, why didn't I get this on time? It's like, we have been thinking about it. We are serious about getting you this thing, and we will get it to you.
And I do agree with that 100%. I think both with Kickstarter, every kind of crowdfunding, whether it's Kickstarter or Patreon, the more transparent you are about what's happening, the better that is. It kind of cures all ills. I'll just say in response to the direct question, I also have not had much entitlement from my readers. I feel very lucky in that regard, because I know some people do. But my own personal, here's one thing that I would put out to kind of other creators is this term that I kind of like, which is called trimming your tribe. There can be a desire to kind of be all things to all people and to try to please everyone and meet everyone's needs. And yet that's not why I started this. You know, I can go back and I can be a video editor again and I can realize other people's visions and I can make that money. That's not why I'm making the sacrifices I've made to kind of become a creator of comics and put this out there. I'm doing it so that I can kind of follow my own vision, and that vision includes pleasing my audience. That includes pleasing my audience in certain ways, but not in terms of somebody snaps their fingers and I meet everybody's needs. So I would say, be comfortable while you're, as a creator, whatever kind of project you're doing, to kind of self-select your audience so that the audience you wind up with are the people who really believe in what you want to be doing and want to be supporting what you want to be doing, as opposed to thinking you need to please everyone.
I'm probably lucky in that because I'm doing more community service with my Patreon, and I mean, I know Carlos, full disclosure, he knows that if someone actually did have the nerve to do that to me, it would not end well for them. But, I think because I'm serving the community, and I've made it very clear that, there are days it's a struggle, there are days when, something may not get out, or I may have a delay in mailing something out if someone's owed a physical reward. Again, the transparency and just saying, here's what I'm doing, here's what I'm able to do, reduces that, because I think we've all been lucky in that no one's ever tried to snap their fingers and go, you owe me this thing, you owe me this blog post or whatever. Because again, it doesn't help us as creators, because then it's like, yes, I owe you because you are supporting me, but there's a line between support and demand.
Well said.
Just a little thing is to add, we were just talking to someone yesterday about a Kickstarter she wanted to do, and she had already imagined angry customers that didn't exist yet. And there's a tendency to envisage all the problems you'll have with other people, and the truth of it is most people just don't care too much. Everyone who runs a Kickstarter knows you'll get a survey back, or 5 years after the project, they'll be like, oh yeah. Most people aren't scrutinizing you as hard as you might imagine. So at least, and the people who are usually jerks. So I would never let that hold you back from doing something.
Yep, and again, with just the people who are kind of giving you that hard time, when you say that they are jerks, you kind of have to think of the 80-20 rule, in that, that 80% of, where you put 80% of your efforts only kind of yields 20% of your success, and vice versa, 20% of your efforts put in 80% of your success. So you really have to think, is it worth it to spend 3 hours to kind of talk this person down the roof so that they still stay your patron for the $5 a month? Or can you just bow to them, say, I respect your opinion, you treat, if you can't follow me for this because you want to see the D in my books, and they're not, I didn't actually show that, and that's the only reason you're going to support me, I bow to you. You can find that someplace else on the internet, and I understand. So.
I will give you $100 right now to draw that.
Oh, well, for $100, okay, then.
All right.
You can do whatever you want.
On this panel, put that projector back up, and
let's do it.
All right, I see you.
It's about to get sexy in here,
I see
everybody.
you patiently waiting for a question. Can I see a show of hands who all we've got? Okay, I just wanted to see how many people we had and where we are. You've been waiting for a while, and then I'll get you next. Can you, with the lovely shirt of a pug that I can't see?
This might be a little cynical, but I've always kind of thought of crowdfunding and patronage services like this as this is a way for you all to turn your social capital into something that's going to sustain you.
Yeah.
That's it.
You all have had a lot of success with it. I'm curious, somebody who doesn't have that social capital, is this for them? For example, if you've only got 80, 100 Twitter followers or something, you're not, you want to make a niche or something, but you're not, brilliant. Should you even try for Patreon, or do you need to put out your work and then build up a body and then build up a big following first, and then launch a Patreon? When
Sure.
do you do this?
So the question is can people that don't have large social media followings, or I think the more economic term would be social capital, is Patreon for them? I would I have to tell you no. So this is where I think I have a little bit of a unique view on this. In the tech industry, I work a lot in the Mac community with like Mac celebrities like John Siracusa, Marco Arment. And what they found is these are alpha level Apple people. If you talk to anyone at Apple, if you talk to any Mac fan, they're the first people you think of. They have found that even they cannot get sustained money coming in from apps. So Marco Arment, very famously with this last version of his podcast player, turned it over into a patronage model and used his social capital to do that. And it's at a point where it's sustainable. Sadly, very sadly, I would say we're at an economic point where your social capital is more helpful to you than like having a steady job. Just to give one more example, I was talking to a major journalist, I'm not gonna tell you what website, but they were telling me how even though they had what many people consider a successful, stable job, they were spending a lot of their money on their Patreon and like getting their social capital out there because they realized 10 years from now, their video, their ability to get an audience, that is what matters. Working at this important website is not. So this is unfortunately the reality that we're in. And this is why sometimes when I'm sitting at my office and I'm like, gosh, I should really be, spending time on, doing more engineering as opposed to Twitter. But Twitter is a vital part of my job, So I think unfortunately that is the case.
Brianna, I'm sorry, I will have to disagree with you.
All right, cool. We can still be friends.
Yes, we can. And see, this is the whole point of the weekend. You can disagree with people and still like them. Because, so just for context, before I started I Need Diverse Games and it really took off, I had maybe 300 Twitter followers. As of yesterday, I've finally went over 3,600. And that's still not a large amount of people in the grand scheme of things. Arthur is sitting over there and other folks that have very large followings are hyper visible. And while social capital is great, I know I benefit from my personal Patreon being successful because of the work I've done on I Need Diverse Games, so it's a trickle effect. I would say, build your presence, because one thing I've learned is that if you are not an unknown quantity, and there's a lot of people asking for dollars, there's a lot of people asking for attention. If I saw your Patreon and didn't see what it is you were trying to do, or if it wasn't clear, then maybe I'm not going to support you, or maybe I have to see more from you. So I would say, as much as I despise this word, build your brand. I know, it's a terrible word. It's the best word I can think of. I'm sorry. I've been up since 6 a.m. But, or social capital is a word. Fill that social capital bank and then go from there. And then talk to other people, network. You're here at GamerX, have business cards. Have a Twitter that is just for what you're doing, have your personal Twitter, because separation of self and business is vital. But get known out there, because if you just throw a Patreon out now and you have maybe, I don't know how many Twitter followers you have, but let's say you have 100, it's not gonna garner the steam that you need. So, I'm around, any of us are around. I would say, talk to people who have successful Patreons. I would not discount it out of hand, because if you don't even try, you'll never know.
Yeah, I would never. The part of the question where you said should you not start at all? I mean, definitely you should. If you have the bandwidth to launch it, you should just like starting a webcomic or anything else. I would say don't delay. Don't wait for something to happen. That said, I'll say in all forms of crowdfunding, in my own personal experience, the most effective way to increase your success is to build your audience and to have a big audience beforehand. For a Kickstarter, which is a one-time event, for Patreon, you have a little bit more flexibility in that you can build while you're going because it's ongoing. The thing I would say about Kickstarter is that Kickstarter is a party. But if somebody came up to, it's a horrible way to introduce yourself. So if you came up to somebody at a party and say, "Hi, I'm Al, give me money." I mean, it's better to introduce yourself through your work, and through the value you offer. Again, I'm thinking transactionally. That's just how I roll. But to offer the value ahead of time, and then the question comes in, "Hey, can you support me, or would you like to support me?" And I think particularly, and this was a point I think that you were making earlier, one of the things that I think is particular about Patreon versus anything else that I've seen is that it's people who already believe in you who are the ones who are going to fund you, because it is an ongoing thing. Kickstarter, somebody might take a chance, like, oh, I like that monocle thing that you put in a condom wrapper. I've never heard of this guy before, but hell, that's a cool idea. But for Patreon, it's going to be more, if I'm going to sign up for $5 a month or $1 a month or whatever it is, then it's probably I already have a relationship with you that's already been cultivated beforehand. And maybe that's through social media. I suck at social media. Maybe it's just through showing up and putting your work out there and being known. But I will say that in terms, it shouldn't stop you, but in terms of growing your kind of any kind of crowdfunding success, the more effort you put into building your audience, and particularly the right kind of audience, so again, trimming your tribe and all that, people who actually understand that you work and work has value, I think the better you will do.
All right, I promised a question here.
I'm a musician, content creator, and so this is more towards the content creators. Oh, by the way, at Mako Fury on Twitter, Mako Fury on Facebook.
Good.
I like that.
And one thing that's baffled me, and I've Googled it and everything, is how, for those of you who are content creators, you're going to want to make something that's only for your audience, that you also continue to have copyright control over. How do you handle the hosting of that and distribution to the people under Patreon?
Okay, so the question is, as a content creator, how do you handle copyright and hosting while also distributing to your patrons through Patreon?
And are you concerned, just so I can be specific about this, are you concerned about like DRM? Are you concerned about people stealing your work and posting it up on, 4chan or whatever, or?
Apparently.
As long as they don't have a monetized YouTube video, I don't, because I'm independent. I can have Sony say, hey, take it down.
So I have some things to say about this, and maybe everybody else does too. I mean, one thing that I would start with is that when you are, particularly unless you are Sony, your biggest, the biggest problem really isn't piracy; it's obscurity.
Right.
And so. Yes, I mean, I often get like a thing on Twitter saying, "Oh my gosh, your nude portrait of the big bad villain. I saw it on 4chan. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it?" I'm like, those people weren't going to give me money anyways, and my patrons got to see it first, and maybe these people, I watermark everything so that they will come back to my comic. I would say in terms of distribution, I mean, I use Amazon S3, and so I just have a folder that people can download directly from that. And you can also use Dropbox Public if your thing isn't so big. But yeah, I would just say, if part of your question is concerned about DRM, how do you lock it down? I would suggest, for what it's worth, that it's better, it serves the chance of building your audience more to have it out there. I mean, I ask my patrons and everybody else to be respectful and not spread it out, and the vast majority are very respectful of that. But if it happens, I think it might serve you more in the long term than hurt you.
Yeah, to add to that, so it used to be in webcomics that the going wisdom was always have people come to your main site because that's where your merchandise is, that's where your ad revenue is, or whatever it is you do to make money. Not everybody agrees with me on this, but I've come to think that that's a flawed model. What you really want to do is just get as famous as you can, as much social capital as you can, and then sell premium services, whether that's a physical object or like a special restricted song in your case. I don't know what it is, but if you have a song that just gets all over the place, out of your control, that might not be a bad thing in the long run. I mean, I know there's a visceral, like, everyone's taking my song and they don't know it's my song and all this, but yeah, I totally get that. I have the same thing when 9gag removes my watermark and posts my stuff. It's awesome. Oh. Yeah, they're cool. I know it's not it's somebody in particular, not 9gag in general, but anyway, yeah. So I think in the long run, like, so we just had, at least money-wise, our most successful Kickstarter ever, and I would say, I think we sold to 7,000 people, and on a day-to-day basis, the website gets more than 10, 20, 30 times that much. So we're not selling to every single person. We're selling to a small group of people who are willing to buy premium services because they like what we do. So I think just trying to get the most notoriety you can is a better strategy than trying to police. But that said, when you say you're not Sony, you can C&D people. You can do it. If it bothers you, go C&D them. They'll stop. Most people will stop.
Yeah. I have a super quick comment to add on to that. Something we would love to do at our company is we are constantly, especially as we're moving into VR and AR, I would love to send people binaries, and use that, leverage that to be like basically, bug reports, things like that. I would love to loop them in on that. The problem is, Patreon and also Squarespace's tools for actually releasing large binaries, they suck. And I can't even package up Unreal Engine enough to get it out through that. So then you're looking at using some third-party service like Digital River, and even Dropbox has limits on that. So I would imagine it would work better for something that was more visual media or something like that. But if you're talking about software, it's actually an order of magnitude more expensive to put that out there. And that's a very serious limiting factor.
All right. Ooh, had a hand up very quickly.
So I've kind of got two questions that both specifically around interacting with Patreon as a system and platform. The first one was recently they changed how they show the price per tier, the amount of pledges you have. So my girlfriend produces comics and published work, and I've been asking for this for the past, since she started it, I think over a year ago. And because there was always a problem for people that had to do a pledge and then revoke it right before payment and then put it back. And so folks would always look at it and be like, well, you're making $1,000, why do you need money? And so the second part of the question is, how do you justify it to your patron if you have to? Like, $1,000 a month is not that much money, that barely pays for rent.
All right. So the question is, so recently, if you weren't aware of it, for a very long time, Patreon has always been transparent, but the numbers that they were reporting were actually incorrect. They would report you receiving, if somebody pledged you $5, you pay a credit card fee off that $5, right? And so they would just say, $5 has been added, whereas now they will remove the amount that you pay for that credit card fee. Also, if somebody's credit card defaulted or something, they entered the information wrong, Patreon would count that towards your total and they would display it on the site, but then you wouldn't actually get paid that amount. About 3 days ago, they fixed that. So now the numbers that are being reported are accurate, which is in some ways helpful for creators because now people don't think that you're earning more than you actually are. But at the same time, you still have this patron problem of how do you explain to people what that money means in terms of your life? Like, to them, it sounds like $1,000 a month, that's a lot of money. But to you, it's like, my rent is more than that, and I also need to eat. So what do you guys think?
For my personal one, I've actually got a cost breakdown of this is what it costs me to live. And my kind of final milestone is the amount I'd need per month to not have to have a day job. And for the I Need Diverse Games ones, we don't really have a breakdown because month-to-month expenditures vary. It's not like there's a set thing going out. But for the one I've put out to be able to quit my job, I've been very explicit of X amount is my rent, this is what it costs me to have health insurance, this is what transportation will cost me. I live in Chicago, it is not cheap. So I think having that explicit cost breakdown, especially in the intro, will let people know, but again, everyone doesn't have that same thing. So I guess depending on what you're putting out, if you can have kind of a breakdown, if you always have the same costs like shipping or production, and people can go, oh, it actually costs you $500 a month to ship out all these comics, I'm going to give you more money.
Mm-hmm. I actually take a very different tack because I am terrified of telling the Patreons what we spend our money on. And that's why I actually take the approach of telling them, what they're going to receive. For me, it's very focused on, with this amount of money, we can create episodes every week. With this amount of money, we can create a special, full-size art piece that you can print out or use on your desktop or something like that. And for me, the way I deal with that, like how are you spending this money, is by keeping it very vague, but making it clear that you're getting something for this money. I'm not going to break down our exact costs for you because on my side, I'm a little concerned that costs may change, or somebody may come back to me and be like, I found someone who makes t-shirts for this amount, you should use them instead. And it's like, well, maybe they're not the best t-shirts, right? Let's not go too far down this route of trying to do my job for me, please. But for me, that's my approach, is I just talk about what they're going to get and leave it very vague how that money is going to be spent. Because I know I have a plan about how much everything's going to be spent. And like I said, I add 20% to everything because something's going to go wrong. And then I just tell them, we can afford to do this at this price.
I think that's brilliant. That's one of the benefits of kind of a transactional approach, is that you can be offered, here's the value I'm offering and here's what you're getting for that. I would just put one other thing in there, I think, is LGBTQ people. And I think that there can be a lot of feel like we need to justify making money. That some folks, some in the world, particularly, older cis white men don't necessarily feel they need to do that. They feel pretty comfortable. I'm in it to get rich. I'm in it to kind of make money. Whereas some of the rest of us can feel like, please, can you just give me money? Can I? And I think it can be useful you're not necessarily putting out the thing, I'm here to get rich, but I think to have some confidence, to say, hey, look, I mean, I'm putting out real value in the world, and therefore it's okay to actually make a living doing this. It's okay to actually make more than just scraping by, so I just meet my bare minimum of rent, whatever else, that actually I can flourish doing this, and we can all do this together. And I think part of the thing that, again, this goes back to the building your audience and trimming your tribe. I mean, that's the kind of energy I try to send out. I even wrote, I have a mailing list, and that's another good way to kind of build your audience, by the way, is have an email list. That's the most successful way for me. I even wrote a post recently about reaching for the stars, where it is my goal to actually have real financial success, making genre comics with gay heroes, and I think that not only is something that would make my life a positive thing, but I think that actually sends a message to future creators. Hey, look, there's a real audience for this. This is a way you can really make your living, and it's not just scraping by. You can really flourish making cool, diverse comics for cool, diverse people.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, 1 second. I just wanted to add in the extra layer of, being a woman of color on the internet. That's so much fun trying to get people to value your work. So I think, for those folks of color in the audience, I know there are a few of us here this morning. Think about that as well, because again, like you said, there's a justification that other people do not have to do. Yeah. Granted, the work it's nice to get messages that I appreciate the work you're doing, but I've got to work 2x, 3 times as hard to get that recognition from people. So, and this is me just having a moment of, for the people you are supporting on Patreon, if you're thinking about Patreon, realize that a lot of the work that goes into it is very hard work in addition maybe to a full-time job or something like that. And especially if you are out here trying to support creators of color, drop a note of thanks. Drop a note of thanks, because it is often thankless and tiring work. So that is me being a curmudgeon for the moment.
I wanted to add on to the transparency thing that you're adding. So does anyone else up here end up dealing with a lot of internet harassment from your Patreon? Okay, you do. So something I've learned is you have to be very, very opaque with it. So I once posted a picture of my motorcycle after I paid it off. And one of the persistent lies about me it gets told is I blew all my Patreon cash on buying a $15,000 motorcycle. It's like, can I borrow your dog for a second? I have taken pictures at cons with hey, look at this cute little thing that I got. It will be Kotaku in Action will form a topic like Brianna Wu blows Patreon cash on garbage at convention. It will almost be funny if they weren't ruining people's lives. So, you do have to be extremely thoughtful about everything that you're putting out there. And sadly, something I've learned is they don't just go after you. They will go after the people that support you. We've had to really work on making our asking our people to make their settings transparent, so it doesn't show up, because Kotaku in Action will go through and email and harass people on your Patreon list. So I would say, sadly, as much as you want to be transparent, for some people, I would imagine both of us, it's a playbook that doesn't work.
Okay.
There are questions over there, too.
Hello.
Sorry, we're going to call somebody else.
I'm trying to bounce between sides of the room, but I'll get to you next if that's okay. Okay, over there.
Yeah, so I will be transparent about why I'm asking this. I get paid for what I do, and I get paid enough to make a living off of, but I don't get paid on I have a freelancer's problem. We have to chase down people, we have to invoice them multiple times, you have to wait 60, 90, 120 days, and it would help me if people who are fans of my work, did a tip jar kind of thing where I got a recurring payment every month. But the plain fact of the matter is, I don't have the extra bandwidth to do more work to provide rewards. It would be purely if you're a fan, this is a way to tip me. And I've been sitting on the fence over whether or not to do that, expecting that I would get blowback from you're asking people to give you money for nothing, right? And so that's kind of where I am and where I imagine other people are with that, because it wouldn't be my primary income, it would be supplementary. That would help me, and I think there are people who would be willing to do it. But I have that, and I also have that personal thing. Should I do that? Should I ask people to give me money if I don't technically need it, right? And so that's where I am with that. So.
You want me to restate the question?
Yes.
So the question is essentially like, I don't have time to be dealing with a whole bunch of reward stuff and asking people for this in addition to the work I'm already doing. How do I handle that? Is that about right?
Yeah, I'm getting paid for what I'm doing.
Yeah. So let me give you an example from my own experience. So we, I think at the $5 level, we say I do a session once a month where I draw by request, like draw me Batman on a skateboard and I'll draw it. And we have about 500 people at this level, I think, at this point, and a good session, we get maybe 3 people show up, which is on one level like that's kind of a bummer. There should be 500 of you at my little show, but it means that there's a bunch of people who just want to give money and I don't even know if they read that there was a reward. So don't underestimate that Patreon has sort of created a social protocol by which people who just want to help you can do it in a way that's appropriate. So as we kind of said earlier, don't imagine the people who are upset at you. There are not many of them, and when they make themselves manifest, you can block them.
I would just say, that's something that kept me from wanting to do it for a long period of time. Actually, it was a fear. I was maxed out with my bandwidth. I didn't have any more room. And so part of it was coming up with ways to kind of like, well, how can I have what I've already created but make it into a premium thing for the backers? So for example, I already had these wallpapers that I'd created for Kickstarter backers. And what I did is I've never sent out any high-res versions of that, for example. That's something where, okay, well, you pledge at the $10 level, you get the high-res versions of the D, in terms of the guy in the pinup. And people like that. Or even, for example, just listening to, for example, what my readers were saying. Like, there was a time where my colorist, because of various issues with the internet, couldn't get the colored page to me in time. So I posted up a penciled page, and it had the word balloons in it. And the readers went nuts. They loved that. They loved seeing the pencil page of that thing. So I created like 3 of my first stretch goals. Well, we hit this stretch goal. I'm going to post up the pencil page with every update. Right. We hit this stretch goal. I'm going to put up the thumbnail page and the pencil page with every update. We hit this one. I put the script page, all this behind the scenes stuff. In the end, how many people are super excited about that ultimately? It's hard to say, but every now and then somebody comments like, oh, I see how that developed in this thing, and that's really cool. And in terms of extra time, that's an extra 5 minutes for me to kind of put that together. And I would just say, if you can, just be thinking, if you're looking to add value, look for ways that aren't involving sending physical rewards. Just by my own lights, I think that anything that involves shipping, it adds expense, it expends time. And look for the things that would be fun for your readers, and listen to your readers, the stuff that actually for you might be trivial, but could be actually kind of fun for them, that actually does not take much of your time in terms of a digital reward or something extra you can offer, or a monthly Q&A, for example, ask me anything once a month, things like that. I would just say, I was really intimidated by that. That's what kept me away from Patreon for many months. And once I plunged in, I realized that actually there were things I could offer that were of value that actually didn't hurt my bandwidth. And then once you quit your day job and you're focusing on Patreon, then you actually have some more time to work on stuff.
Well, one thing I do is, because there's a lot of people who don't want to commit to a monthly thing anyway, is we do have just a simple PayPal button on the site. So if someone's feeling generous, they can just throw a few bucks that way. But in terms of bandwidth, you write a lot, so maybe excerpts of things that didn't get published or blog posts, because one of the rewards I've got for my personal Patreon is you get to decide the topic of a blog post. Now, I've emailed everyone at that level. One person has answered me. So people would like to give you money, just to say, hey, and just, again, be honest. People know who you are. It's like, this is just a cushion. Because right now, my Patreon money goes in a savings account. It's like, this is something I want to do. Here's what I'm able to give you in return. And, here's a tip jar. Because, our friend Tarek Musa just has a tip jar as his pinned tweet. He's like, I don't have it in me to do a Patreon. And if you want to give me money and feel generous, great. If not, I totally understand.
Yep. Author, I would point out that you do. What I find interesting about your work is you don't directly benefit from a lot of the things that you write about. He's a fantastic ally for women in tech. And, you could be writing about issues that are more personally beneficial to you. So I guess I would turn that around and say, and maybe it's because I deal with a lot of venture capitalists and entrepreneurs with my day job, but do you think for 4 damn seconds anyone like in the engineering field goes, gosh, do I really deserve this money that I'm getting over here? And I really think it's one of the ways the left like holds ourselves back, and it's not helpful. Now, what I'm about to say, this is about a friend, so I want to be really clear. I 100% support Marco Arment, but to get back to his example, Marco was one of the, he was the second hire at Tumblr before they were bought out by Yahoo for how many $1 million? Like, and we don't know how much shares he got from that, but like he is a successful person. And he has a patronage model with the software he develops. He doesn't sit there and go, gosh, do I really deserve this money? Is it fair to ask people to pay me for the podcast app I'm developing? It just holds you back. So you are doing awesome work out there in the world. So I give you my personal blessing to go forward and ask for that. And I would happily signal boost that, because your writing is important.
All right, I promise.
What factors do you need to consider when deciding whether to charge per month or per creation?
Okay, the question is, what factors do you need to consider when deciding whether to charge per month or per creation? Let's just go down the row. I charge per month.
Per month.
Per month.
Per month.
Month.
To add to that, I mean, there's a lot of what you're looking for with Patreon is stability,
Yes.
which is the big thing for my business model that disambiguates Patreon from everything else. Is it's stable, and so if it's per creation, it's not stable. It's when you can summon the wherewithal to create the next thing. And the other thing that's nice about a monthly subscription is most people just don't think about it. Like, if you're giving someone $1 a month, will you ever cancel that? Like, you know what I mean? And that's a big source of stability, though, is like you don't cancel $1 subscriptions or $5 subscriptions. So I would say I don't even see why you would ever want to go anything other than on a regular time schedule. That just seems more reasonable to me.
Yeah, I think I've done periodic look-throughs of Patreon, and most of the people that I see that are using per creation are doing it for a hobby thing. Like, I'm a photographer, an amateur photographer. My friends give me money when I put out my pictures, right? But for the stability reasons that Zach mentioned, most of the people who are trying to turn Patreon into a steady source of revenue, turn it into a steady source of revenue by going per month. The only thing I would say about that is make sure that you have something for your patrons per month. It doesn't have to be a full creation. Especially if you're making one of the exceptions I've seen is there's one, I can't remember their name right now, but there's this one video production company that makes these amazing over-the-top Hollywood-style videos with explosions and stuff, and they do per creation, but they get a lot per creation because they have these enormously elaborate videos. But generally, you want to make sure you have something per month, and it doesn't have to be a finished product, but it can be sketches of the art that you're working on. It can be an audio recording that's going to go into the show, something like that, just to make sure that your patrons have something, and like we said, it can be something that you're already working on, so it doesn't necessarily increase your bandwidth.
Yeah, for us, one perk that I started doing, at least on the I Need Diverse Games side, is people get the podcast a day early. So it's a small thing, it's already ready, and it's a nice little perk to be able to get it a day ahead of everyone.
I'll just put out, there is a ninja technique you can use, that the per creation thing. There's somebody on Patreon named Sakimi-chan, who actually gives me faith in the world, because this is a young woman who creates fan art, who through Patreon is getting somewhere close to $500,000 a year or more. And I think that is awesome. And one way that she makes it happen is she actually does it per 2 weeks. Yeah. So your pledges, the pledges are kind of look like the same kind of pledges you get for everyone else, $1, $5, whatever, so on. But then it's per 2 week. And what she does is I think she has 2 creations a month. Even though she puts out other things, she doesn't list. You have the choice of listing something as a creation or just as a regular post. So there are some kind of ninja ways to use it. In terms of when you might also avoid using per creation. I mean, I put out twice a week. I have two comic pages that I put out every week, and that would be 8 creations a month. That gets a little nutty, even for people who are just pledging $1 or something. So that's another factor.
How
Okay.
does the money generated from Patreon figure when looking at taxes? How do you?
You have to report that income. You seem like a nice guy. Don't go to jail, please. Please report that. No, seriously. If
about reporting that, I assume
So there's a program called TurboTax, and you put it in there. If you're a larger company, you enter that in there. Yeah, I mean, it's taxable income. You know, for us, because so much of our stuff, for us, you know, it's a common lie that I make a ton of money off my Patreon. I've yet to make a damn dime off my Patreon. It all goes to employees. So it's this interesting taxable situation where I have income and then immediately goes out as an expense, and they have to, you know, pay the Social Security and all that kind of stuff on it. So yeah, report that income, do it transparently. You know, any kind of tax software will be able to handle it. Yes?
This question is, do you guys get W-2s at the end of the year?
1099s, right?
1099. Just very quick, because we just got the wrap it up motion.
Yeah.
I got notified like after I got $600 total in 1 year to fill out a W-9, and then I'll probably get a 1099 at the end of the year. So, you know, the IRS knows you're getting this money.
Yeah, and make sure to account for it just real quick, and then I think we're done, right?
Yes.
But like, I've had a lot of friends where this happens. The first year, they finally make some money. They forget that when you get straight cash, like as opposed to working a day job, all of it's taxable. Unless you spend it on something else. So you might get the biggest tax bill you've ever had in your life, so set it aside from the beginning.
Yep.
Yeah.
I see pink hair and a question.
Hey, just a comment. I did freelance for the first time last year, and it's sort of a con, so you can write a lot of stuff off of that. So like,
yeah.
I only made through my freelancing, I only made like $3,500 last year, which that's pretty good for me. But when the government wanted to take a nice bite out of it, it was like, you owe the government $1,200, and I was like, but yeah, you could do H&R Block or H&R Block is good to walk you through it, but there are ways to write off, especially if you work from home, like the portion of your apartment that you're using to work in, tech, buy, stuff like that, and that pretty much went down to like $50 a month free, so keep that in mind too.
Yeah. Consider getting a CPA if it's a decent amount of money.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, even if it's a relatively small amount, it's almost always worth it to have a professional. The system is complicated.
I would guess we'd need to close it out. I also say I wouldn't count H&R Block as like the best place to go for this. You know, there are definitely accountants that kind of specialize in smaller stuff than, you know, the McDonald's of accountants. So
yeah, absolutely.
All right, it looks like we're wrapping up, but thank you all for coming.
Yay.
Thank you, panelists, for being here.